The Night of Dobe Kund. The forests of Sheopur and Shivpuri, in those years, still belonged far more to the beasts than to men. Their narrow paths wound through teak and sal, and the silence was broken only by the lunger's warning call, or the sawing cry of a leopard. Tigers walked those paths as though they had been carved for them. And the villagers, who lived in scattered hamlets along the banas, accepted this dominion as a matter of faith. It was into this ancient kingdom that the Maharaja of Gwalior chose to release his lions. The lions were not of this soil. They had come from across the black waters, their lineage shaped by the African plains. At Dobe Kund, a stone fortress of 20-foot walls, they had been prepared for their new life. Buffaloes were driven into that enclosure, their terrified bellows echoing against the stone, so that the lions might learn the chase and remember the taste of living prey. It was thought this would harden them for the wild beyond the gates. The lions inside the walls. Before their release, the nights at Dobe Kund carried an eerie dissonance. From inside the high walls came the deep, resonant roars of the lions, and from the forests beyond answered the shorter, guttural calls of the tigers. The lions roared often, their voices long, rolling, filling the valley, as if to stake a claim to a country they had not yet seen. The tigers, less wasteful of breath, answered sparingly, but with a note of irritation. The villagers, who lived in the shadow of the fortress, would gather at night to listen. For generations, their ears had known the cough and rasp of the tiger. It was a sound they feared. Yes, but one they understood. A long silence after such a roar meant the tiger had settled to stalk. Repeated calls meant he was patrolling his ground. But the lion's thunder confused them. Some swore it was not an animal at all, but the voice of Bhairav, the mountain spirit, angered that men had walled in the forest. Others said it was the ghost of an ancient Raja, condemned to walk the night until his palace was rebuilt. A few, braver or perhaps more foolish, insisted it was a tiger grown to monstrous size, for how else could a beast's voice shake the very earth? Mothers drew their children close when the sound rolled across the hamlets. Dogs refused to bark. Even the cattle stirred uneasily in their pens, as though they too recognized that something alien had entered their world. The warning. On a moonless night, not long after their release, the forest was startled into wakefulness. It began with the lion's roar, long, defiant, announcing his kingship to a land he did not yet understand. The sound rolled like thunder, echoing through ravines and carrying for miles. To the villagers, it was as though a storm had broken, without clouds. Then, from the opposite ridge, came the short, rasping call of the tiger. Unlike the lion, the tiger does not proclaim. His roar is abrupt, edged with menace, and when he gives it, all creatures within hearing know precisely who speaks. To the villagers, this was the familiar voice of the forest. Feared, yes, but understood. The two voices answered each other across the darkness. The lion's drawn-out thunder clashed with the tiger's sharp challenge. Old men muttered that the two great spirits of the jungle were quarreling
over who would guard the river.
Young boys, listening wide-eyed, believed the world itself might end if the roars did not cease before dawn. To many, it seemed as though two storms were building against each other in the night sky, and that the jungle itself would break under their meeting. And the clash, those close enough to hear, told later of a sudden silence, followed by the crashing of undergrowth, as two bodies met with terrible force. The earth itself seemed to tremble with their struggle. There was no mistaking the sounds. The heavy coughing grunts of the tiger, the throaty bellows of the lion, punctuated by the tearing of brush and the thud of bodies rolling over dry earth. A shikari who went with the dawn to the place of uproar described the scene with a voice that shook. Even years later, the ground was ploughed as though a herd of cattle had fought there. Saplings snapped, the soil dark with blood. And in the center of it all lay the lion. He was magnificent even in death. His mane, that proud collar which once caught the sun, was clotted with blood and dust. Deep gashes scored his flanks. His belly had been ripped open by claws that knew precisely where to strike. His eyes, still open, stared unseeing at the forest canopy above. Of the tiger there was no sign, only pad marks leading away into the forest, calm, deliberate, as though the victor had no need to hurry. Of the lioness there was no trace. Whether she fled deeper into the forest or met her end elsewhere, no man could say. The legends of Dobe Kund. For weeks the villagers spoke only in hushed voices. They had known the tiger all their lives, feared him, respected him. The lion, though alien, had carried a grandeur that made them believe perhaps two kings might share a kingdom. But the jungle itself had given its answer. The tiger had not roared his triumph. He had no need to. The silence of the forest told enough. And in that silence was written the law of the land. Strength alone does not make a ruler here. It is stealth, patience, and the knowledge of every tree and shadow. Why this story endures, the Dobe Kund incident, is no fireside tale. It was witnessed, recorded, retold by those who stood close to it. And it survives, even today, in written accounts. It remains one of the rarest, most authentic records of a lion and a tiger meeting in the wild. Not behind iron bars, not in the sand of a circus pit, but in the living jungle itself. And in that brief, violent moment, the ancient question of kingship was asked and answered in blood.